Revenge films.
My name is Thomas Smith. I live together with my wife, Sarah Smith. We were about to enter our 3rd year of marriage, and we had been discussing as a couple that maybe it was time for us to start thinking about kids. But then one day, I suddenly received a phone call from my mother. She seemed pretty desperate, and she asked me to please let her stay at our house for a few days. When I spoke to my wife about it, she was worried. On the phone, my mom sounded like she was feeling down, and my wife said that we should go and pick her up immediately. When we got there, my mom was carrying a large backpack as well as a big suitcase. She was already outside of the house, standing in front of the nearest convenience store. Based on how much luggage she had, it was obvious that she wasn't staying just for 1 night or 2 nights. When we saw my mom carrying so many things, my wife and I ran out of the car and ran straight over to her. Once we helped her with the bags and got my mom into the car, we asked her what happened. The first thing she said was, "I'm so sorry to ask you to come here so suddenly, Thomas." And she seemed like she felt really bad. When we drove home and finally got back to my place, we asked my mom to tell us what happened. But what my mom told us next was the shocking reality of what just happened to her. My father had passed away 5 years ago, and ever since then my mom had been living at the old family house alone. 2 years ago, my older brother Michael got married, and when he got married, it was decided that Michael and his wife Karen would move in with my mom. My mom always had a laid-back, shy personality, and she was definitely not the type to bully her daughter-in-law. If anything, I had heard that she was getting along well with my sister-in-law, Karen, and things were going well. However, my mom said that after it was decided that they were going to renovate the family house, that was when the tide turned and things started to become terrible between them. As it turns out, my sister-in-law wanted to live in the renovated family house alone with my brother Michael, and she started treating my mother like she was in the way and a nuisance. In front of my brother, she would play the part of a kind and sweet wife and good daughter-in-law. But as soon as Michael wasn't around, her attitude would change 180 degrees. She would say things to my mom like,
"As soon as the house is finished, you're moving out, right? You better know that that's what you should do."
And she started bullying my mom. However, because the family house originally belonged to my parents, even if she was told to get out of the house, it's not like my mom had anywhere to go. And so, no matter what my sister-in-law was saying to my mom, she was tolerating it and living there. But then, when Karen realized that my mom had no intention of moving out, she started physically harassing my mom. For example, one day when my mom came home from doing the groceries, she discovered that the front door was locked. No matter how many times she rang the doorbell, my sister-in-law refused to open the door, even though she was definitely inside. On that day, it was in the middle of the winter, and it was a particularly cold day. My mom said that she was shaking from the cold while waiting outside the front door, and the only thing she could do was to wait for my brother to come home from work. Around the evening, just before my brother came home from work, my sister-in-law finally opened the front door. And when she saw my mom shaking from the cold there, she said,
"See, this is what happens to you when you don't listen to what I say when I'm telling you to get out of this house and you don't. If you don't want this to keep happening to you, then you better hurry up and move out."
And apparently, she was laughing as she said that. On top of that, she also said that if my mom told Michael about any of this, when they have children and my mom would finally have a grandchild, she said that she wouldn't let her lay a finger on the child. And that's how she prevented my mom from saying anything to Michael. My mom was tolerating this bullying from my sister-in-law day by day, when eventually the renovation of the house was complete. And they were finally about to start this new life in the newly renovated home. But then, that was when my sister-in-law's harassment only escalated. She would go to my brother and cry to him, saying that my mom was the one that was bullying and harassing her. And then she started telling all of the neighbors that my mom was actually a horrible person that loved bullying her daughter-in-law and ruining her reputation. My mom finally lost it and decided to confront Karen about it all. That's enough already. If you don't cut it out, I'm going to tell my son everything without sparing any details. But then my sister-in-law was furious, and without my mom's permission, she gathered up a few of her belongings and threw the suitcase and my mom out the front door and then locked the door. And then, without having any other choice and nowhere else to go, my mom ended up calling me. When I heard what happened, I was furious with my sister-in-law and immediately picked up the phone to call her. In the beginning, she tried to cover it up by saying,
"Oh, please, your mother is lying about everything. She's the one that packed up her own things, and she's the one that stormed out of the house."
But I knew that my sister-in-law was lying. And so, my wife and I snapped back at her. I have never in my life seen my mother look this upset. At the very least, I know that she would never lie to her son, so you better start telling the truth. When I said that, Karen finally showed me her true colors.
Oh, please. Don't you think it's normal as a couple to want to live together in our new house without having someone else in the way? I thought that your mom could at least read the room and move out on her own, but she refused. This is all her own fault.
She said that like it was a given, and then she continued on to say,
"And plus, my husband is the one that paid for all of those renovations, so that means that it belongs to us."
She had raised her voice at this point. When I heard that, I was stunned, and the only thing I could say back was, "What?" But my sister-in-law yelled again.
Like I said, if Michael owns the house, it means that it's also my house, and that means that I have the right to kick anybody that I want out of it, including your mom.
She was ranting, so I decided to hit her with the truth. Wait a minute. Seems like you have a little misunderstanding, Karen. Don't you know that the renovation of that house was fully funded by my mom's savings? But then Karen replied,
"Yeah, well, I heard that from my husband, but I'm sure that he was just lying and saying that so she could continue living there."
That was her response. She refused to believe me. I realized that my sister-in-law had a big misunderstanding, and I had enough. I immediately called my brother next, and I told him everything that had been happening. My brother was shocked, and he didn't believe me at first. "You must be kidding! There's no way, because they always got along so well in front of me." Michael did listen to what I had to say. However, it seemed that he still didn't fully believe me, and so he didn't go after his wife immediately. And then, a few days later, one day I received a phone call from my brother, and he asked me, "Hey, Thomas, can you talk to Mom and try to convince her to come back here just one time?" But then, when I asked my mom, she said that she didn't want to see Karen, so she refused. But then, Michael said that he had an idea and gave us such a suggestion. The plan that he presented us with was to place a voice recorder inside of the house, hidden from view. And then, he said he was going to purposely leave our mom and his wife alone in the house together. Michael continued to say that if in fact Karen was actually bullying our mom, he said that he was ready to divorce her if needed. When I told my mother that, she reluctantly agreed that if it's just that one time and for this purpose, she would go back to that house. And so, that weekend, I jumped in the car with my mom and I sent her back to the family house. Just as I expected, my brother's car wasn't there, which meant that my sister-in-law was home alone. I waited outside of the house, hiding from my sister-in-law's view, and about 30 minutes later, my mom came out of the house. When she got in the car, she said to me,
"Mission accomplished. I think we got a full recording of the bullying that I've been through. She showed her true nature."
I then picked up the phone and I told my brother that everything was finished. He said that he would rush straight home and check the recording on the voice recorder. From there, all we could do was wait to hear back from my brother, but we ended up not hearing from him for the rest of the day, not even the next morning. We were all wondering what happened when 3 days later, I finally received a phone call from my brother. He said that he wanted to talk as a family and asked that I bring my mom back to the family house. So my wife and I went with her. When we arrived, Michael was standing in the living room, and sitting next to him was Karen, whose shoulders had completely shrunk. As soon as we walked in the door, he turned to his wife and said, "Hey, don't you have something to say?" and glared at Karen.
"Ma'am, I'm really sorry for everything up until now. I apologize,"
said Karen in a tiny voice. But my mom replied,
"No matter how much you regret or feel sorry about what you've done, I have no intention of ever living with you again."
When she said that, Michael stepped up and said, "Don't worry, Mom, you don't have to live with her anymore, because I'm going to be having her leave this house." Without paying any mind to us, as we were trying to grasp the situation, I noticed that Karen had a large backpack. And then she said,
"Thank you for everything until now."
And with tears streaming down her face, she ran out of the house. And then my brother turned to me and simply said, "I'm going to be getting a divorce from her. It's over." We completely thought that Karen's bullying towards my mother was the reason behind it. But then my brother continued to tell us another shocking truth. Just in case, apparently my brother had been setting up the voice recorder in the house 2 days before my mom arrived to make sure that it worked. When he played the recording, he discovered that the day before my mom went over to the house, Karen had brought her boyfriend over, and she was having an affair. When he confronted Karen about it, in the beginning she refused to acknowledge the affair. But then when he became seriously angry with her, he said that she finally confessed that the reason why she wanted to kick our mom out of the house was because she wanted to be able to invite her boyfriend over and have her affair in the house. And then, for 3 days after that, it was a war zone, but the divorce was decided. Apparently, Karen was begging not to get a divorce until the very end, but he kicked her out once and for all. Without knowing that the house was rebuilt with my mother's savings, Karen kicked her out, and as the cherry on top, she'd brought her boyfriend into the house to have an affair. I never could have imagined that. After Karen left the house, my mom was finally able to get her house back, and she was living there with my brother. Michael sued Karen for a settlement fee, and after that, the divorce went through. As it turns out, the guy she was cheating with also had a wife, and Karen was sued from both sides. Apparently, she had to ask around to her relatives to borrow money, and these days she's struggling to pay them all back. As for her boyfriend, apparently he didn't get a divorce and was forgiven by his wife, so he threw Karen away. Even though Karen was left riddled with debt, wasn't able to find a job, and didn't know what to do, and she sent a long letter of apology to our mom.
"I promise I won't ever do it again. I will treasure you for the rest of my life. So please convince my husband and let me live with you again."
When she read that, my mom said she ripped up the letter and threw it away. Karen had no more money and continued to repeatedly take out loans, and I heard she ran away in the middle of the night from her apartment. When she tried to ask Michael for help, he said she needed to take responsibility and blocked her. He said that he's never going to see her ever again. Now that my mom's moved back in with Michael, she regained her energy. According to Michael, he's going to be wary about marriage. And after the trouble that he caused our mom, he said that he just wants to focus on taking care of her.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.